The African Nova Scotian Justice Institute has a very clear mandate. We have been established in order to address the systemic anti-black racism that exists in the justice system on large. We produce impact of race and culture assessments here, which are an influential tool that are being used to bring a deeper understanding of black people's lived experiences to the courts before black people are sentenced by courts in Nova Scotia. The Anderson case here in Nova Scotia is the law of the land, and it essentially said that when you're adjudicating or sentencing a black person, you must take into consideration the fact that you're sentencing a black person, and the best way to gain the information you need to take that into consideration is through an IRCA.
And when that was made mandatory, it was, I believe, Brandon Rowe from the Institute who spoke at the hearing on behalf of the Institute?
Yes, it was actually, that hearing took place before the Justice Institute was established, and so he was still a lawyer at Legal Aid, and he was representing the Decade for People of African Descent Coalition as an intervener on that appeal case. And yes, but
he's
Brandon
now
Roll,
he's now with the Institute.
Now,
right.
Yes, he's a senior lawyer at the Justice Institute. The Justice Institute, we have as our mandate to address these issues. We have been working on issues related to policing. We have been certainly working with issues related to the sentencing and the courts, and it would make perfect sense for us to be working collaboratively with the Public Prosecution Service in the delivery of, or in bringing to life this policy and to support the training of their staff.
Both the Liberal provincial government, the former Liberal provincial government, and the current Conservative government both have expressed support for the Institute. So
it's both advanced funding for the Institute.
It's not a partisan sort of institute or
No, it's not a partisan institute. It was established as a black community-based nonprofit to advance these things because the black community has such a wide agenda for advocating for the community on justice issues that establishing an institute made sense. And we weren't initially funded by government, but once the government realized that the provincial government realized that this is really a part of their mandate, and that the federal government had announced that they were implementing a Canadian black justice strategy, then the provincial government here in Nova Scotia advanced the development of a black Nova Scotian justice policy. And of course, if you're going to advance a policy like that or a program like that, and there's a Justice Institute that you have not yet demonstrated your support to, they came on board and supported the Institute. And I think we've had a very productive working relationship with the provincial government, but the nature of the relationship is going to be tense because the government manages systems, and the Justice Institute is designed to combat systemic racism in those systems.
The government is paying the Institute to hold it to account.
Basically, yes.
It's a bit of a catch-22.
Yes.
Or is that overstated?
Well, I think that's how systems change. There is this dynamic tension. Of course the Public Prosecution Service wants to do better, but unless there is external pressure and external direction as to how to do better, they will not be able to do this work. It's not like they have said, oh, systemic racism is rampant in our organization, let us discharge 50% of our employees and hire 50% new employees and make sure that all of those employees are already dedicated, committed champions of equity issues in law, so that we can ensure that we're going to make these things happen. Of course they couldn't do that. The Public Prosecution Service lawyers are people who've been employed and who have been honestly advancing the work of the service as they have been directed by previous administrations and as they have been directed by the kind of the social contract mandate that they've believed that they've had. But in recent years, we've recognized that there are some fundamental flaws with that mandate, and that mandate is not inclusive and is actually discriminatory. And so now we have a fair treatment policy that is designed to kind of shake up practice and help the system be more critical in their operations, and even establishing a group within the Public Prosecution Service who can help prosecutors be more competent when it comes to this kind of practice.
Right.
We should not say that because black folk are only 3 to 5% of the population of Nova Scotia, then this is a minor issue. What I would say is, when it comes to asking the question, does your justice system respect the charter rights of the citizens of this province? In answer to that question, we need to understand that Indigenous people and black people are the metaphorical canary in the coal mine.
What does that mean?
What it means is, when in the old days when people used to work in mines, the question is the air good enough to breathe down there? And so they would put a canary in a cage and take it down in the cage with them. And if the canary died, it was probably a good idea to get out of the mine.
Okay.
Right?
This is the bird you're talking about?
Yes, a bird, a canary. So what I'm saying is, the evidence of injustice in our justice system is seen most clearly in its treatment of racialized people, in this province, particularly black and Indigenous people. Think about the street checks issue. Street checks was a standard operating procedure of police that disproportionately targeted black people, 5 to 1.
Right.
Even though black people are a smaller part of the population, we were dramatically overrepresented in that statistic. And it was the black community that rose up and said, hey, a couple of things. A, the use of this practice is racist, and B, the use of the practice is illegal anyway. And we advocated for the Wortley report, and then we advocated for an independent legal evaluation of the street check practice. And what we found was that street checks as a practice was illegal. So we didn't say street checks as a practice against black people is illegal. Street checks as a practice against all Nova Scotians is illegal. And so it was the black community advocating for its rights that was able to overturn a policy that was a policy and practice of police that was actually violating the rights of all Nova Scotians. And so if our justice system, if our public prosecution system, just as an example, is unfairly prosecuting blacks and Indigenous people in this province, then we have to be concerned about whether or not our public prosecution service is actually respecting the rights of Nova Scotian citizens in its operation, right? And that just because, so people shouldn't think, well, it's only negatively affecting black people.
I'm white, I'll be all right.
Just like street checks, even though black people were disproportionately counted in those stats, the majority of people whose rights were violated by street checks were white people. And so our agitation stopped the practice that was harming all Nova Scotians. And similarly, as we continue to look at systemic racism in the public prosecution service, that is an issue that has implications for all Nova Scotians who will find themselves someday in a courtroom with a public prosecutor from this province advancing a prosecution against them. It's not just something that black people need to be worried about or indigenous people need to be worried about. All Nova Scotians need to worry about whether or not the justice system is delivering true justice, or whether there are classes of people who are being unfairly treated.
Where do you see us a year from now? How optimistic are you?
Well, I'm eternally optimistic on this point, recognizing that we've already established the need for change. The change is inevitable. So, for example, it was in 2003 that Kirk Johnson advanced his human rights complaint about driving while black, right? And it was the 2003 Kirk Johnson decision that made police start keeping race-based statistics on their traffic stops and street checks. Now, the Human Rights Tribunal found that there was systemic racism in the stops that Mr. Johnson suffered. They recognized that this could be a larger program. They said that the police had to keep stats and that they had to do a study to unpack the racism in the practice. So we won. Now, mind you, the police sat on that directive, kept the statistics, but didn't study the statistics until the black community agitated and CBC FOI-popped the data that had been kept, and we found this dramatic overrepresentation of black folks. So
the street checks data.
The street checks, yeah.
Right.
So Kirk Johnson won his case in 2003. Fast forward in 2019, when we advocated and the Human Rights Commission did hire Scott Wortley to do the report, and the report was thorough and recognized the practice that was problematic, we won that. Later on, when we recognized that Scott Wortley, as a socio-legal scholar, was not able to comment on the legality of the practice, we again advocated for the Human Rights Commission to commission an academic to do the study that had been ordered in 2003. And Scott Wortley came and he did his study, and the study demonstrated even more clearly how the practice was problematic. Then we advocated for because he couldn't do as a socio-legal scholar, he couldn't do the legal analysis, we advocated for them to hire someone to do an independent legal opinion, and they hired former Chief Justice McDonald to do that study, and sure enough, the practice was found illegal. And so then the province had to put a moratorium on the practice. So we have been winning every single time we are in the fight, we win. The problem is we have to keep fighting in order for each implementation of these remedies get implemented.
So what does the average black Nova Scotian who hears this, what should they do, what can or should they do if they want to get more involved? And I mean, it sounds like it's hard work, but necessary work, I guess, the way you describe it.
Well, I think that every Nova Scotian should be concerned that our justice system is truly just and should be advocating for governments at all levels, because of course policing is administered municipally and the Department of Justice is administered provincially, and the appointment of federal judges in Nova Scotia is done federally. So Nova Scotians should be talking to all of their politicians, asking them, hey, where do you come down on the rights of people in the justice system? Are you ensuring that the rights of citizens of this province are respected in police service delivery, in the prosecution of crimes, in all of the extrajudicial matters like restorative justice and other diversion programs, how are they ensuring that the justice system is just? Because even if you're not black, you should realize that you have a vested interest in ensuring that the rights of all Nova Scotians are respected in these spaces. Because if they're not respected for one group, then the whole integrity of the system is called in question, and no one can be certain that their rights will be adhered to. Well, ANSJI has a responsibility to keep the public informed about the work that they're doing and to keep these issues front and center in the minds of Nova Scotians. We also have the responsibility to be representing clients and to be supporting the education of lawyers, both within PPS and in other spaces, to ensure that all practitioners in the systems understand their responsibility for dismantling the systemic racism that exists. That's our job. And I think we're doing a fantastic job with the resources we have to do just that.
Oh, honey, we're about to get very busy up in here.